In 2004, Thomas Sowell wrote an article about the pitfalls of affirmative action. In it, he specifically talks about what we have come to know as virtue signaling. He points out that historically, the Jewish community rose from the slums and poverty without affirmative action. The Asian community, specifically the Chinese, rose to academic and socio-economic success without affirmative action as well. Implementation of a strong work ethic, as opposed to taking on a victim mentality, contributed to this success. In the article, he asks, why is this social process, with a proven track record, so little appreciated or even noticed, and sometimes dismissed as a policy of doing nothing? Perhaps that is because, whatever its economic and social benefits, it offers few rewards to politicians, activists, and intellectuals, or to those who wish to seem morally superior by denouncing society. The heroes of these groups' rise are anonymous individuals, not public figures. Here is some history worth repeating, but only if the goal is the advancement of the less fortunate rather than the aggrandizement of those who would be their guardians or spokesmen or elected officials. In an interview from 2013, Sowell responds to a statement about the Supreme Court decision to uphold a race-based affirmative action admission policy at the University of Michigan. Specifically, he responds to a quote from Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, who wrote for the majority. The Constitution does not prohibit the tailored use of race in admissions decisions to further a compelling interest in obtaining the educational benefits that flow from a diverse student body. I'll provide a link to some of the Supreme Court Justice comments on the case, as it's an interesting read, but Sowell's issue is with the assertion that discrimination based on race will automatically lead to educational benefits via diversity, and that diversity will be worth the damage that comes with race-based discrimination.
It would have been nice if she could produce one speck of evidence for it. One of the things that when I was going around, when I was taking my kids around to pick colleges, I would go into the lunchroom at lunchtime and look around. And if I found that all the black kids were at one table and all the white kids were at a different table, I knew what the atmosphere was at that school. I went to school in the 50s. I never saw that. So that you say what the benefits are going to be, and then you come along and test it. You don't just say, that sounds so wonderful, and there's no need to go any further. And if you look at what has happened in these places, you find that the polarization is far greater after these policies are followed than there were before. When I was teaching at Cornell back in the 60s, the average SAT score of black students at Cornell was at the 75th percentile. The average SAT for the white students in liberal arts was at the 99th percentile. We all taught to the students who were at the 99th percentiles. Students who were at the 75th percentile had a hard time trying to keep up. They didn't have the reading speed, they didn't have the mathematical facility, and so on. Had these very same students gone to some place where the other students were at the 75th percentile, they'd have had no problem. Half the black students at Cornell at that time were on academic probation. It was even worse at MIT. The average black student, when this study was done some years ago at MIT, scored in the top 10% nationwide in math. They scored in the bottom 10% at MIT.
Sowell's claim that student graduation rates and academic success can be hurt instead of helped when admission isn't based on ability seems to be supported by a recent study. In March of 2016, a study by a civil rights group found that although graduation rates were increasing overall, the gap between the graduation rates of white students and black students was getting wider. The study went on to highlight some universities, including Ohio State, that managed to close the gap. The researchers found that school and statewide policies aimed at preparation for university and in assisting students to compete and prepare from the time they were in high school were instrumental in their success. If race-based affirmative action led to diversity, which then led to educational benefit because of that diversity, then the graduation gap between white and black students should either not exist or should at least not be getting wider. The authors of the study seem to have the mentality that more needs to be done, where it would seem that Sowell supports the idea of working differently, and definitely supports the idea of ending policies that the evidence shows don't work. Further to this, race-based affirmative action doesn't assist individuals that are actually in need of support. Jonathan Haidt shows that the test scores of students based on class are now much wider than those based on race. race-based affirmative action disproportionately helps the affluent instead of the needy.
This is a graph that shows the achievement gap in students, in high school students. The blue line shows the gap between kids from a high-income home and a low-income home. So this is the achievement gap by class. And as you see, it's been rising rapidly. From the 1940s through the year 2000, it's risen rapidly. Rich and poor didn't used to be so far apart, but now they're really far apart. The orange line shows the gap between black and white. If you go back to the 1940s and 50s, before Brown versus Board of Ed, it was big. And we've made a lot of progress. And as you see, around 1965, the two lines crossed. So the achievement gap by class is now much bigger than the achievement gap by race. But what does affirmative action do? Affirmative action is aimed at people like this. Now, if the Obamas had never gone into politics, if you simply have two married lawyers and they have kids who are smart and go to a good school, they are the kids that every top school is desperate to get. They get all kinds of lures and benefits. They're guaranteed admission. This is what affirmative action aims at, the children of black professionals above all. These kids are out of luck. They're born to a white single mother. Affirmative action will not help them because they are not in a preferred victim class. So I was on a conference call back about 5-6 years ago. Remember, there were a bunch of ballot initiatives where states were banning affirmative action based on race. I was on this conference call with a Democratic pollster and members of civil rights groups trying to workshop the language to defend race-based affirmative action. I finally had to say, you know, the reason why nobody has found that language, you know, you've got a lot of smart people in all the political operative shops. The reason why nobody has found the language is because it can't be found. You cannot defend race-based affirmative action as a matter of fairness in America in this day and age. To the extent that social justice persists in focusing on race rather than class, and class is the big issue of our time, they're out of touch. And frankly, I think it's unethical. So the left had a chance, Obama had a chance to get the Democrats out ahead on this. Remember in the campaign, his first campaign, he said, when my girls go to college, I don't think they'll need special help. That was a wildly popular view. Unfortunately, he didn't follow through on that.
Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe. If you liked the video, be sure to leave a comment and hit that like button. If you didn't like it, please explain why. Open discussion is the only way to have a better understanding of differing views. Sharing this video on social media can help keep conversations alive. Now, here are a few other videos that you may be interested in.